The fire at Twin Parks West was four of the worst fires that all have been in the Bronx in the last 30 years in New York City.
13 people dead in December 2017. Officials say that blaze was started by a 3-year-old boy who was playing with burners on a stove.
And that is not an accident. It is a tragedy, but it's not an accident.
Individuals who are responsible for the neglect of that building and for so many fires in the Bronx must be held accountable. No individuals should have to have space heaters. No individuals should have doors that do not close.
That blaze was started by a 3-year-old boy who was playing with burners on a stove.
It is a consequence of a society where poor people are left to live in conditions that put them at greater risk.
By a 3-year-old boy who was playing with burners on a stove.
If we are all truly children of God, then we deserve safe, decent, affordable housing.
And I ain't seen nobody be a bigger snowflake than white men who complain. Mommy, mommy, they won't let us play.
And a space heater is often a cry for help.
If the police could recognize that, look, black people call the police more than any other group.
Before I call police, yeah, I said she might call police. Yes, I call police. I call
And have everything we used to have under the old regime, where we were white racists and supremacists and dominant and patriarchs and hated gays and lesbians and transsexuals. That, yeah, you gotta share. This ain't your world, this everybody's world.
Yet it remains not only valid, but essential to question how such a strong alternative version of events was able to take hold so swiftly and to be accepted so readily.
From a 77-year-old woman and dragging her to the ground.
Shows a man walking up 3rd Avenue, suddenly shoving a 92-year-old woman. She loses her balance, falling to the ground, hitting her head on a fire hydrant.
Pretty much ends the violence at that moment. But look at just how disgusting this is to watch. The looting has got...
If 2 black people killed a police officer, they would instantly become heroes. Yeah.
For decent and dignified housing. I want you to know that we are all Gambians and Africans today. The world is watching, and I often ask, why do good people have to suffer so deeply and so tragically? And it is a question to which only God has an answer. Never say of anything that we have lost it, only say that we have given it back. And we have given back these 17 lives to God. And we will never forget them, and we will always love them with our heavy hearts.
But similar to Sunday's fire, they left their front door open.
The NYPD will announce a new initiative today to combat the spike in hate crimes against Asian Americans here in the city. Sources tell CBS 2 it will include undercover officers to help gather intelligence and quickly respond to incidents.
By the end of the week, Asian American undercover officers will hit the streets across New York City.
The next person you target, whether it's through speech,
said Ang Wang has been in frequent communication with an unidentified Chinese consular official he referred to as boss.
menacing activity, or anything else.
Prosecutors say they have the officer on tape. In one of the phone calls listed in the complaint, Ang Wang offered to, quote, raise our country's soft power by having the consular official attend NYPD events. Also, allegedly offering to provide him with non-public information about the NYPD.
Deputy AG Carlin, says the Civil Rights Division is trained and ready to prosecute hate crimes, working closely with the FBI and local law enforcement.
Walking along a sidewalk or on a train platform,
you're not going to know that the police officers, and we're going to see if somebody is going to look to harm somebody through hate.
11, driving with family members in Georgia. A $10,000 reward is being offered for information leading to his arrest.
maybe a plainclothes New York City police officer.
2 new detectives joining the NYPD's Asian Hate Crimes Task Force.
We speak the language. We try to make the victim comfortable to tell us the full story.
You can now email investigators directly.
The group tried to help the robbery victims because they'd heard about the recent string of attacks on Asians. Police are looking for 3 suspects in that case.
Well, we are seeing the
So in other words, you got somebody
courtesy
killed.
of the rain.
Shows a man walking up 3rd Avenue, suddenly shoving a 92-year-old woman. She loses her balance, falling to the ground, hitting her head on a fire hydrant. The man looks back, but keeps walking.
From a 77-year-old woman and dragging her to the ground. It happened 2 weeks ago as the woman waited at a bus stop on Cooper Street in Bushwick. She was treated for cuts and bruises, but is expected to be okay. Police say the attacker got away with about $20, the woman's glasses, and her Bible.
A Chinese biological virus lab and somehow leaked. Interestingly, the head of the World Health Organization, DG Tedros, said during a press conference, "I do not believe that this assessment about the lab leak was extensive enough. Although the team has concluded a laboratory leak is the least likely hypothesis, this requires further investigation with additional missions, specialist experts that I'm ready to deploy." Essentially saying, even though his team has concluded it's not likely, he's still willing to have another go looking at it. US officials still, former CDC Director Redfield, pointing towards the lab leak, just recently talking to our Dr. Sanjay Gupta. And we also did say, and it was clear talking to people on the panel for WHO, that they did not get the access to raw data they wanted. This was a panel that got access to things that China wanted them to see, the data that China said it was okay for them to see. And they made that clear in their press conference. And indeed, a statement from a number of nations, including the United States, says that there needs to be greater clear access to raw data, and indeed they want more. But there are lots of things in this report that were interesting and suggest the disease was more widespread in December 2019 than China initially let on. There was a rise in influenza-like illnesses in that time in provinces, possibly completely unrelated, but also possibly making it harder to find the first signs of coronavirus, but also possibly too an initial sign of the beginning of that coronavirus outbreak. There are lots of different variations of the virus early in that December too, suggesting it had been around a little bit longer. And also too, that Huanan seafood market that people keep talking about, remember that? Well, that was clearly, it seems, part of an outbreak, but only a quarter of the early cases only came into contact with that wet market. Half of the cases came into contact with that wet market and others as well in the city. So a lot more things coming out here, a lot more questions to be answered, a lot of detailed information, frankly, in this over 100-page long report, and now many more questions for China to answer. Will they give the raw data? Will they give extra data they're being asked for? And how quickly can we get to working out how this began to make it less likely it happens again, Eric?
And perhaps in many ways what this is actually pointing out is how much we still don't know. As you point out, still so many
How much you
questions
still
and some
don't want to know.
Yeah, exactly. Nick Payton-Walsh, appreciate it. Thank you. Well, as Nick mentioned, the U.S. and 13 other nations expressing concerns about that WHO report because of the lack of access to relevant information. They're calling for more transparency when it comes to future reports on outbreaks. I want to take a closer look with CNN of them. And they reportedly sold out in just under a minute.